So, how does the most powerful, most feared drug lord in history engineer his own downfall? You might think it was an army, or maybe a rival cartel that struck the first major blow. But nope, it was a single decision, one born from just pure, uncut arrogance. Let's dig in and see how one man's pride toppled an entire empire. And it all really boils down to this one moment, a single ball of fire in the sky over Colombia. Now, this was meant to be the ultimate show of power, but what it actually did was light the fuse that would eventually blow up his entire world. Okay, so to really get the scale of this fall, you first have to understand just how high he climbed. At his absolute peak, Pablo Escobar wasn't just some criminal. I mean, he was basically a shadow president. He had politicians, police, and a massive global cocaine empire in his pocket. He seemed completely and utterly untouchable. So where did all that power come from? Well, you guessed it, money. We're talking an estimated net worth of over $30 billion. I mean, that's $30,000 million in cash. A fortune so huge, it made him one of the richest men on the planet, and in his mind, totally invincible. And if you want to understand how he thought, it's actually pretty simple, and terrifyingly so. Anyone or anything that got in his way, they were just gone. He had zero problem with killing innocent people to get what he wanted. To him, they were just collateral damage in his climb to the top. Which brings us to the moment everything changed. Avianca Flight 203. This whole operation was supposed to be his ultimate checkmate move against the Colombian government. Instead, it turned out to be the single biggest mistake of his entire life. You know, this was supposed to be a totally normal flight, a Boeing 727, making a short domestic hop from the capital, Bogota, to Cali. Just another day, another flight. But this one had a target painted on its back. And just look at how fast it all went down. The plane lifts off at 7:13 in the morning. A mere 5 minutes later, as it's climbing over the suburbs of Bogota, a bomb goes off. Just gone. The whole plane, just obliterated in the sky. And the human cost? Well, it's staggering. 107 people. You had 101 passengers and 6 crew members on that flight. Not a single person survived. An entire plane full of people just erased in the blink of an eye. The plot itself was just chillingly clever and cruel. The main target, a presidential candidate named Cesar Gaviria, who'd promised to take down the cartels. So Escobar's guys bought seats right over the plane's main fuel tank. Then they duped this young guy into carrying what he thought was a tape recorder on board. They told him, hey, just press record to tape a conversation. But that record button? Yeah, that was the trigger. But here's the incredible twist, the one fatal flaw in this whole plan. Cesar Gaviria wasn't on the plane. His security team had pulled him off at the very last minute. So Escobar had just murdered 107 people for absolutely nothing. I mean, you can just imagine his fury. Not only did he fail to get his guy, he had basically just put up a giant neon sign for the whole world to see, declaring, I am a terrorist who murders innocent people. And right there, that's the turning point. This is where the whole empire starts to unravel. That bombing wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a chain reaction that even Pablo Escobar couldn't control. It's almost hard to believe how badly this backfired on him. His goal was to kill Gaviria. The outcome? The public was so outraged, it actually helped Gaviria win the presidency. He wanted to intimidate the Colombian government. What really happened? He poked the bear, and the bear was the United States government, who now officially joined the hunt. So you can see the dominoes starting to fall, one after another. His pride was the finger that pushed that first domino. That act pushed Gaviria right into the presidency. And because 2 Americans were killed on that flight, it brought in the DEA and the full force of the U.S. government. His whole operation, his men, his money, his power, it all started to crumble. And so the final act begins, with the combined forces of the Colombian government and the United States hunting him down. For Escobar, the world started getting very, very small. You'd think at this point he'd be humbled, right? Nope. Even staring down defeat, his arrogance was just off the charts. He eventually agreed to surrender, but on his own terms. He said he'd go to a prison he built himself. He built this place called La Catedral, and let me tell you, it was more like a luxury resort than a prison. It had a waterfall, a bar, even a soccer field, and he kept running his empire right from his cell. But, this arrangement couldn't last forever. The government got tired of the joke. When they finally tried to move him to a real prison in 1992, he just walked out the back door. That kicked off this massive 2-year-long manhunt, a huge cat and mouse game that finally came to an end in December 1993, when he was cornered and killed on a rooftop in his hometown of Medellin. So what about that vast empire he built? What happened to his family? Well, after he was killed, his wife and kids fled. They went to Mozambique, then Argentina, and they ended up with almost nothing. They had to change their names just to get by, always living in the shadow of his name. It's just incredible. In the end, what was it all for? Nothing. That $30 billion fortune, most of it was just cash buried in stashes all over Colombia. People say that literal billions of dollars just rotted away in the ground or got eaten by rats. All that power, all that violence, and it just turned to dust. And all of this leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? Escobar's story is obviously extreme, but the lesson is pretty universal. He got so powerful that he really believed he was untouchable, that he could blow up a passenger plane and there'd be no consequences. So you have to wonder, is this kind of epic, self-destructive pride just what happens when someone gets too powerful? Is it an unavoidable trap? Definitely something to think about.